Thank you very much, Gerard. That kind of introduction would be cherished by me from anybody, but particularly coming from you, who after all knows me. And I know that generally speaking, you're a person of great integrity. You are a person of great integrity, so it's even more appreciated that you said such kind words. I thank you very, very much. I don't know if you know that my mother and father met at a Purim dance sponsored by the Stanford Jewish Community Center. So then the B'nai B'rith was probably involved there somewhere. My wife Hadassah has now fixed up, has brought together 4 couples to be married. And you know, there's an old it's kind of a superstition, really, that if you arrange for 3 marriages, you've earned your place in the world to come. So obviously, I hope and pray that Hadassah lives to be 120. But I have a friend who told me some years ago that he had arranged 2 marriages, and he was going for the 3rd. And once he got the 3rd, he was going out to eat lobster. No, because he knew his place was guaranteed in the world to come. It was fun to listen to Rob Wexler. He's an extraordinary person, and honestly, Barack Obama couldn't have a better advocate than Rob Wexler. I was thinking, we've been friends over the years, and in all the things that Gerard was kind enough to say, I've been a very fortunate person, been really lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had. Honored 4 times to be elected by the people of Connecticut to be in the Senate, and then that really unprecedented opportunity that Al Gore gave me to be the first Jewish American on a national ticket. Of the various, may I say incidentally that Al Gore, I'll just add this to you because I know B'nai B'rith has been so important to the security and freedom of the Jewish community in America and around the world, that on the night that Al Gore told me that he was going to select me as his vice presidential running mate, he said to me, I want you to know that I talked to a limited number of Jews and Christians about whether America was ready to have a Jewish person on a national ticket. And what I found was that the fear of anti-Semitism among Jews was dramatically greater than the reality of anti-Semitism among Christians. And so I was confident that I could make the choice that I wanted to make. The fact that that was so is in no small measure a result of the extraordinary work that B'nai B'rith has done in this country, and it continues to do here and around the world. And I thank you for that. And of course, Al Gore's confidence was justified in that you know, I take every opportunity I can to point out that he and I did get 500,000 more votes than not to relitigate, but just to say on the numbers that the American people were fair. Now, the reason I thought of Rob Wexler, of all the stories that I've heard about how people reacted that morning in August of 2000 when I heard I was on the ticket, Rob Wexler's is one that I really love. He told me, and I saw him the next week at the Democratic Convention, he said, last week I took my family on a vacation in the Northwest. I forgot whether it was Montana and Wyoming. On that Monday morning, I had the radio on, and I was driving in the open country, I mean on a highway in the open country, and I hear the announcement that you have been selected to be the vice presidential candidate. And I pull the car over to the side of the road. I don't know what to do. I look out, there's a bunch of bison by the side of the road. I get out of the car and I say to them, did you hear that Al Gore so quickly? I will always cherish Rob for that and much more. So I gather you've got John Cowell speaking to you by phone this afternoon on behalf of Mitt Romney. I'm obviously here to represent that small group of independent, undecided voters in this campaign. But I want to just first again pay tribute to B'nai B'rith for your almost 170 years of service, building a Jewish community, protecting the Jewish community, sustaining the Jewish community here and around the world, and of course fighting for and protecting the state of Israel. All of those things you deserve credit for helping to make happen. I thank Dan Marieshan, who's been a good friend and fellow parent of students for a long time, and Alan, I congratulate you. At one point, somebody after the 2000 campaign asked me if I would head a Jewish organization, and I said, you know, the thought of being president of the United States seemed manageable to me. Organization, forget about it. So really, call it kavod, really, and congratulations on your re-election. Thanks to B'nai B'rith not only for what you've done to sustain and support the Jewish community in the ways that I've described, but also for your humanitarian activity over the years. Somebody at my staff went back and looked and talked about the 1868, I'm sure you all know this, Baltimore suffered a major flood, and B'nai B'rith raised money for the relief efforts, and that tradition continues to today as you support the victims of Hurricane Isaac. And in that sense, as Gerard was kind enough to say, really, well, carry out Jewish ethics, really, in the best sense, and give the Jewish community a great name. I thought that I'd want to speak to you briefly today about today and tomorrow, literally. This is September 10th. Tomorrow, obviously, is September 11th. And I want to talk to you about what I might call a September 10th way of thinking and a September 11th, or post-September 11th way of thinking. And really, what I'm trying to say here is the September 10th way of thinking is not to deal with problems that we can see coming. And the post-September 11th is to really finally get together and deal with those problems. But sometimes after a disaster has occurred, as it did on September 11th, 2001, we're facing similar challenges now. This day, September 10th, is the day that Congress comes back into session. It's later this afternoon. We're going to have our first vote in the Senate. And we've got an enormous amount to do. It's the middle of a campaign. It's the most partisan and I think one of the most ideologically rigid times in our history. So honestly, we're probably going to be in for 2 weeks, taking 2 days off for Rosh Hashanah. And this is not so bad either. And all I think that we can be expected to do is basically continue the operation of government, appropriations for government, for 6 months, not doing the kind of detailed budget we're supposed to do, and not dealing with all the other problems we're going to do, coming back after the election in a so-called lame duck session to try to deal with those problems. And this is just expressive of what not only I've found, but what you all see in the Congress. More partisanship than ever. You know, George Washington was a pretty great president, and one of the great speeches that's been made in American history was his farewell address. One of the things that Washington said to that generation of new Americans that still speaks to us is that he warned them about the dangers of what he called factions, really, political factions, which are political parties. And he specifically expressed his fear that loyalty to those factions could become greater than loyalty to the nation and the national interest. And I think increasingly that is what we have seen. The other thing that we've seen is an ideological rigidity that makes it hard to get things done in Washington. In the Constitutional Convention, there was a great disagreement between, as I'm sure most of you know, between the states with large population and the states with small population. The folks from the states with a lot of population wanted representation to be based on population. People from small states wanted a kind of equality of representation. And two members of that Constitutional Convention, I'm proud to say, from Connecticut, Sherman and Ellsworth, stepped forward and offered a compromise, which was there should be two chambers in the Congress of the United States, one that represented the population, the other gave equal representation to the states. That compromise enabled the Constitution to go forward, and of course has been the basis of our government and our democracy ever since. And the point here is that the very institution of Congress is the result of a compromise. In a nation of now almost 310 million people, extraordinarily diverse, represented across the ideological and every other spectrum in Congress, you can rarely get 100% of what you want. And that's where compromise comes in. Not compromise of principle, hopefully, but being willing to accept 50% of what you want, maybe even being able to get 60 or 70% of what you want. And increasingly that is not happening, and therefore problems are not being solved. Problems like climate change, which I worked for. If I had to tell you at the end of my 24 years in the Senate, what's my single greatest disappointment is that we couldn't get anything done on climate change and energy independence. A failure to compromise, and we offered compromise after compromise, but the other side wasn't willing to do it. The same is true now with regard to the budget debt, an unwillingness to make the tough political decisions that we all know have to be made to get our government books back into balance, which incidentally I think is the best thing we could do for economic growth again. Because if we adopted a bipartisan balanced budget program for the next 10, 12, 15 years, then businesses in this country, which today are sitting on more liquid assets than ever in our history because they don't have any confidence about the future of our economy, let alone government policy, they would invest, and it would create the jobs we need. Everybody knows we need to not cut entitlement programs, but limit their growth. Republicans seem willing to say that they're for that. But the truth is we also need to raise revenues. And Democrats are prepared to say that, but they're not prepared to come together and find a way to do both. And as a result, our future is compromised. The same is true in foreign policy as well. I want to go back to the early years of the Cold War when a great senator, Arthur Vandenberg, a Republican from Michigan, supported the internationalist foreign policy of a great Democratic president, Harry S. Truman. Contrary to positions that Vandenberg had taken earlier, which I guess simplistically would be called isolationist, but he felt that's what the moment and the challenge internationally required. In doing so, he famously said that politics must end at the water's edge. That kind of bipartisan spirit is all too rare in Congress today, but in these days of transnational threats, across borders, terrorism, cyber attack, when it is becoming harder and harder to define the water's edge, bipartisan leadership is more essential than ever. I just returned late last night, so I have no idea what time of the day it is, from a trip to the Middle East. For the most part, I was in the Arab Middle East. I didn't go to Israel on this visit. And I found an unsettling prevalence of a concern about whether America is still engaged forcefully in the Middle East, and a real desire that we show leadership, because they still prefer us to any of the alternatives there, and particularly to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I want to speak about Iran finally, then answer a few questions if you like. In Congress, the threat posed by Iran has in fact been one of the rare exceptions to the rules of our current political life that I just described, because repeatedly over the years, Democrats and Republicans have set aside our party differences, to pass the toughest sanctions ever against Iran. And the last two administrations have enforced those sanctions, which have been adopted in that time, with real forcefulness and, I must say, creativity. And they are having an economic effect, as Rob Wexler said, on Iran. But despite those sanctions, the Iranian nuclear program is speeding forward. The sanctions and the economic hurt done to Iran have not affected the Iranians one iota in the development of nuclear weapons. And it's not me saying this or Israel saying this, or it's the International Atomic Energy Agency, a division of the United Nations, which has repeatedly said, again most recently within the last 2 weeks, that every evidence they have is that Iran is continuing to push ahead, enriching uranium and hardening and deepening the facilities in which they're pursuing these ends. Just today, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Yukiya Amano, who's a Japanese national, demanded in a way that the IAEA doesn't usually do, that Iran give the IAEA, this international agency, access to a facility they have, a place called Parchin, where satellite pictures certainly suggest that they were trying to clean up some bad behavior before they let the IAEA in there. According to the last report of this group, the number of centrifuges, this has been done in the last 10 days or 2 weeks, that the Iranians have at the underground enrichment facility near the city of Qom doubled this summer. And every day that passes, the Iranians are accumulating more and more enriched uranium. 4 years ago, they didn't have enough fissile material, which if enriched would enable them to build one nuclear bomb. Today, they have, by all accounts, enough to build, when enriched, at least 4 nuclear weapons, and perhaps 5. At the same time, the program of theirs is being dispersed and hardened, making it more difficult to damage meaningfully using airstrikes. And of course, that's why Israel is so worried that the window is closing for them to decide whether to act. I can tell you that just about every country except Syria in the Arab world is as worried as Israel about this development in Iran. My own view is that this is the single greatest threat to world security today. It's not just about Israel, though clearly Iran has targeted Israel rhetorically. It's about the stability of the Middle East and really ultimately about the stability of the world. This is a fanatical regime with expressly hegemonic ambitions for the Middle East and beyond. And it is also, of course, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, as designated by the State Department of our own country. The reality is that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, it will set off a cascade of proliferation that will destabilize the Middle East and destroy whatever attempts we've made to limit the expansion of nuclear weapons in the world. I think we have a moment of truth coming where, because the Iranians have not reacted to the sanctions and because they have rejected every international effort through the so-called P5+1 process to begin to, in any meaningful way, discuss a peaceful resolution of this problem, they leave us now with one of two choices. And this is the most significant 9/10, 9/11 choice that the world has today. Do we act as we did on 9/10 or in all the months and years before, when we could see, really, if you looked, the attack of 9/11 coming, and in this case we could see it clearly, and somehow conclude that we can live with a nuclear Iran, or do we use the one remaining alternative that the Iranians have forced on us, which is a military strike on their nuclear facilities? I hope this is not the choice they give us, but the clock is ticking. And of course, if given that choice, in my opinion, there's only one choice for the future security and freedom of the world, and that is to attack the Iranian nuclear facilities. And I think it ought to be done by an international coalition. I think it ought to be led by the United States of America, which has the most significant military capability to carry this off and can do it in a way that will not have adverse political consequences for anybody, particularly Israel, in the Middle East. So I will tell you this, just to go back to bipartisanship. I think if President Obama or if Governor Romney is elected, President Romney next year decides to take military action to stop the Iranian nuclear program, there will be overwhelming bipartisan support for that action in the Congress of the United States. I come back with thanks for the opportunity you've given me to speak to Vandenberg and just add a little more from the statement that he made about politics ending at the water's edge. To me, he said, bipartisan foreign policy means a mutual effort under our indispensable two-party system to unite our official voice at the water's edge so that America speaks with maximum authority against those who would divide and conquer us and the free world. It does not, which is to say a bipartisan foreign policy, involve the remotest surrender of free debate in determining our position. On the contrary, frank cooperation and free debate are indispensable to ultimate unity. In a word, a bipartisan foreign policy simply seeks national security ahead of partisan advantage. Those words speak with a particular proximity to this moment that we're at in American foreign policy. So I'm looking forward to taking your questions. I'll just say finally that I am retiring from the Senate this year, but I'm not retiring. And wherever I am, whatever I have the privilege to be doing, I look forward to having the opportunity to continue to work with B'nai B'rith and continue to pursue the goals that this organization and this great country of ours have always pursued. Thank you very, very much.